go. Let's do this.
WV Uncommonplace. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate series to get to know the hosts, along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episode. The Uncommonplace digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to Uncommonplace.
Greetings, everyone. My name is J.R. Sparrow, and I have a special guest with me tonight. And we're covering two topics, and this is a wild thing. There's a book that we're going to talk about, but the focus at the very beginning is on a lady that has a legacy of leadership, a legacy of breaking barriers. And what I want you to understand when I say this, I'm an African-American male from Central Virginia. I grew up in the suburbs, but we didn't start there. Our generational wealth was not there. It's only coming in to fruition as I speak. So to have this lady on my show is very prestigious for me. And she has a title, Lady, which you don't get that unless you're a humanitarian. And where I come from, humanitarian people or their work sometimes goes underneath the radar. So before we get started, I just want to, take a second and say, hey, we as a community, we love you. And this is an episode for me that's very special. And I'm just going to give you your applause ahead of time. Here's your applause right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lady Dhyana Ziegler, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight. And can I call you JR?
Yes, ma'am. That's what everybody calls me, good old JR.
Okay.
Now, let's start it off just right, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I know you've been doing your thing for a long time. You built an extraordinary career as an educator, media executive, and public servant. And that's where, in the public servant area and everything else, you got the humanitarian title of lady from the work you've done. When you look back on what you've done, what accomplishment feels most defining to who you are today?
Well, that's a very, very broad questions. I would hope that when I look over my career, the most important thing to me is the impact that I've made on people's lives, to move, to do things, to know that they can achieve. And so often I talk to some of my former students, and I'm still humbled by it, because they tell me, you poured so much into us. So I guess if I think about the legacy at all, it's the impact that I've had. Did my words mean anything? Did my writings have any kind of impact that has some longevity? Did I change anybody's life along the way? Did I give them hope? Did I motivate them to know that they can do something with their lives? I mean, I'm a little Black woman who was born in Harlem, one block from the Apollo Theater in New York City. I had no idea, growing up, that I would even get a Ph.D. I thought that I was going to help save the world through music, because I'm also a songwriter producer. And back in the day, I had a #1 disco song, Time Moves On by Strut. What happened? Yeah, it was the #1 disco song. Look it up. Time Moves On by Strut. I wrote and produced some other songs as well. And I know we'll get into the book, but I was running my brother-in-law and Edward Patton's company, Patton and Guest Productions, as executive vice president. And I really thought that that was going to be my path, that I was going to help save the world through music. And it's so funny because I've been opening up boxes from New York that I have not looked in for years. And today I found so many of my songs, so many just things that I wrote. I used to write all the time, just wake up in the middle of the night and write. And it was like, spiritually, God was just giving me these messages. And I was looking at some of that stuff today and I says, wow, it's like I didn't write it. It's like so impactful and it has so much meaning to me now. But how I got into academia was just a whole little curve because when Gladys Knight and the Pips broke up, and that was where I was doing most of those last years before I became a PhD. I had to do something, so I hopped back into school. And it's so ironic that I graduated with my bachelor's from Baruch College, the City University of New York, and I was still working in the music business while I was going to school. And then I found out Baruch College was using a product that I created, disco bells. Now, if you lived in New York, everybody knew disco bells, and they were in Cosmopolitan and Essence. And when John Travolta walks in on Saturday Night Fever, he does like this, and he's wearing disco bells when he first walks in. Well, and I found out all of that stuff today as well too. So to have this interview with you and tell me that I have impacted people's lives, I'm just, just taken aback and humbled with so much pride. And how I got into journalism was because Baruch was using disco bells as an example of new product marketing. So I was on financial aid and all that stuff. I says, I can't let them know that I'm the one who created this product. And I'm on financial aid. And I met a journalism professor who knew that I was a copywriter producer. I was in advertising too for a while. And you're familiar with Vi Higginson?
Yes.
Okay, well, Vi Higginson um, did all of my Uncle Ben's rice commercials, and they played them for years in New York. I even had one original music rug with Hubert Laws
Whoa.
on that. So the Vi Higginson commercials and all of that, well, the professor told me, look, you're a copywriter, you should be in journalism. So I needed to get out of the School of Business, so I hopped into journalism.
And that's
And I was still dealing with the music business. And actually, I used to go to school and in the evenings, go to the record companies, change my clothes and put on, instead of my tennis shoes or whatever, put on some boots and all of the stuff, however the fashion we wore going around, to still trying to make deals and, deal with records, because I was not only still producing, we were producing Willie Bridges, who was a saxophone player in New York at the time. And I wrote a couple of songs on that album, and just discovered as I found this new music today that I even wrote the lyrics to a third song. So, I was saying to my aunt who is visiting here and who's kind of helping me get this stuff out of the garage, I said, it's as if I've had all of these several different lives, because I grew up in Harlem. My sister and I were dancers. Again, I thought that I was going to be in the arts and the theater. So, God sort of sends you in direction, and, all of a sudden you end up where you're supposed to be, because none of those things I left. That's what I get the question sometimes. Well, how did you leave music? And well, I didn't. When I got my undergrad degree in journalism, I was running like crazy. I was the managing editor of the paper. I was the news director of the radio station. I worked the 1980s election with Walter Cronkite. I found the book that we have a duplicate book that in 1980s in the garage. I have a credit in that book. I was responsible for tearing off the wire copy and bringing him state by state as an intern. So there, I was in the middle of New York where you couldn't even get into a news car. I used to have to meet the news crews, at I had to take the subway because there were union rules. But if they told me to go stand out in a phone booth for hours, which I did because there was a bomb threat, I mean, I was just amazed and so thrilled to do that. So going through that. And then by the time I got to, I graduated, after hopping out of the music business when the group broke up, hopping back into school, going from business to journalism. And when I left school, I'd won all the journalism awards. I won seven awards, but I was running. I was just running a race, and I still today I'm like that. I have to finish. I have to do my best, and I have to make an impact. So when I got ready to graduate, my dean said, "No, you can't stop now." So he started encouraging me to go to graduate school. So I ended up at Southern Illinois University, which was at that time the number 3 university in radio and television. So I walked right in there, got my own TV show. Radio was again, we could not, touch equipment and stuff in the studios of spliced tape. So when I first got to Southern Illinois, women were being, some of the college and the community, they were being raped and nobody was talking about it. So again, that drive in me, we got to do something. I did a 7-part series called Rape is a Reality. And it was so funny. I remember my news director, because I could go and interview and all of that. And then he said, well, you got to splice this tape up and put it together. So now I got 7 hours or so that I had to do a promo tape for 30 minutes. Luckily, because of my music background, I could hear in between beats and slice and splice. So I did it, and we won a second place associate press award. So that's how I entered in Southern Illinois University, and then created some TV shows as well. I mean, again, I've just been so blessed with so many opportunities. I was the first Black female graduate assistant walking who worked in radio and television and teaching the students at SIU. And ironically, I when I started with 15 males. There was one other Black. He was the first Black male, and he had been a year before. But I graduated by myself. I beat them all out within a year. And then I overlapped my dissertation, my PhD work with writing my master's thesis. Now, mind you, I told you about CBS. I was going to write my master's thesis on Walter Cronkite. They let me copy everything from the files, and that's probably in my storage. I still have that stuff because, I'm always thinking I'm going to lose something important. And what happened was I met Max Robinson. A lot of people don't know who Max Robinson is. He was the first Black network anchorman. He was on with Peter Jennings and Frank Reynolds. I always have to teach my students about that because they missed him in the history books. So because of meeting Max Robinson, and Max was very, very angry at the racism and all of that stuff that he had experienced in the business, he talked to me and some students for about 4 or 5 hours. I recorded him and I changed my whole idea. So my thesis was significance events in the history of Blacks in network television news, and Max Robinson got a whole chapter. Now, why is that so important? Well, I get to the University of Tennessee, where I get my first assistant professor job, and who's involved with Tennessee? Alex Haley.
Oh,
Alex is one of my mentors. And Alex, we spent a lot of time together. I, also did interviews with him that aired on PBS, A Visit with Alex Haley. And I'm in the documentary that Warner Brothers did on him with Malcolm's daughter, who was his goddaughter, doing the narration. So I meet Alex, and he read my thesis. And, I was a new assistant professor trying to get published in the big 42,000 university where, there was so much racism and all of that stuff going on that I was in there fighting. My mother used to come down and ask the dean, please don't let the Klan get my child, because I raised so much hell about what was going on. I didn't understand it. How could this be going on? I'm a New Yorker, where I used to say we learned socialization riding the subway because we were up in everybody's faces. So Alex, told me to carve that chapter out, which I did. And I got it published in the Journal of Black Studies. And what's significant about that, Molefi Kente Asante, if you know about him, the father of Afrocentricity,
yes.
um, he then, another friend, and we became like co-writers. My first book was with him. He had started a book on Africa's, and we named it Thunder and Silence. And he says, well, I'm not really in broadcasting anymore, so you finish this. So between Alex and the Max Robinson piece and Molefe sending me that book, and he always says, well, she put the theory in it. Well, again, I was running a race and I love to write. So that was my first book. And what's significant about that? Again, you started out talking about you being an African American male. Well, I'm the only Black woman in the college. In fact, I'm the only African American ever elected faculty senate president, and I was elected in 1994 and served. I was president-elect then from 95 to 96. There has not been another one since. Okay. I was the voice, the one who was fighting everything. I used to be the state chair of the Tennessee Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights. And I was co-chair of Black Hawk. So I was fighting a lot because I didn't understand how they could be there, Black folks, I'm saying, in Tennessee and not talking about this stuff.
Right. If it
So,
was hidden or was hidden then. One thing I do want to get to, because like you said, being, me and you were talking about like the race part of this. Like the Mason-Dixon line splits between West Virginia. That's what, because they call West Virginia the North South and the South North. You coming down to Tennessee, Knoxville, and those areas, and even you saying like 1994, people don't understand. That's why I really wanted to have you on the shows, because people don't
yeah,
understand.
I was there from 1985 to I was on leave for a couple of years to 99. So, and I'm a New Yorker, so it was crazy.
Cultural shock.
Confederate flags everywhere.
And the thing is that I want to get at is this thing, like you paved the way, and people don't understand that. They would think that even at your age and my age, like 40 years ago, life was not sound as it is now, and people don't understand that we're at a point where anybody that's between 40 and at least 75, we've dealt with some form of hardened racism. Not so much what happened in the 60s, but when you came to Tennessee, it was an area like, even to this day, I mean, I still go through that area, but Tennessee is an area that you have to still be careful to this day, and even the most western part of Virginia and the most eastern part of Kentucky. Now, how does it feel to know that you were a trailblazer? Like you paved the way. Like,
Well, as I look at this wall, because I have stuff from the governor here in Tennessee. There was a joint Congress and a joint resolution. I have all of this stuff on my walls. I really did not know that that's what I was doing. And if I roll it back to when I got to graduate school, Southern Illinois, 1981, my first march was in 1981 because my sister was out in the 60s, but I was too young. But my first march was 1981, and it was to keep Black radio on the air for the weekend, not during the week, just for the weekend. They were trying to take it off. And I was so proud and excited about being able to march. And I remember I started a group there, Blacks in Communications Alliance, started so many different things that I did not realize what I was doing at that time. I was just a crazy, little New Yorker that's saying this is wrong and let's do something about it. That's what I'm saying. My mother used to come down to the dean in Tennessee and say, please don't let the Klan get my child, because I used to get hate calls. I would send them up to the president and the chancellor, all different things, but I just kept talking. And the chancellor finally said to me, he says, I am happy that somebody has finally come here and said that this is not right. I was also a faculty counselor to the president of the institution because I just kept going on. I found an article today. Again, it's so funny. God works in mysterious ways that I would find all this stuff and you would know something about me and I could talk about this. They fired, and while I was at the University of Tennessee, they fired 3 white people.
Whoa.
But see, I always fought against injustice. And I read the article because I was telling my aunt, look, I said this quote, they were treated like criminals. They were treated like dogs. That was in the article. And I said, I remember this. Well, I went out there and talked. I mean, and these were good people. So, it wasn't just black and white, it was justice too. And it got all the way to Nashville and they were hired back by 5 o'clock.
What?
Yes. So that's the kind of stuff because, remember, I was a broadcasting professor. So all of my students, they were working in the news media. They always knew they got the great sound bites from me. So when that went out and I just went, ballistic about it, because again, these were 3 people, they had no I mean, it's almost similar to what's happening in our country now. There was no reason for them to be fired. They've all done great work, but they were so grateful, but again, it was just wrong. And, that's the way I still feel about things. What is just wrong, I have to stand up and say it's wrong and do something about it. So, I continued the struggle, and something I just found, my when I was promoted to full professor, and I was also telling my aunt about that, and very few, if any, Black professors were promoted to full professorship. So I was tenured a year early. I got my full professorship 5 years after that, as soon as I was eligible. And I was president of Black Faculty and Staff Association, chair of the Chancellor's Commission for Blacks, chair of the Kansas Commission for Women. I was on the athletics board. I just found my picture that Pat Summitt signed over to me, good friend, and had the whole. I mean, I found some gems. So you asking me about my life, it just, I've had a glimpse of it today. And, and what you said to me before the show and doing the show lets me know that it has not been in vain, that my life has meant something and I've had an impact on someone.
Yes, ma'am. And I want to tell you this because, like, the thing that people don't realize, like, when you actually look at the scope of things, And nothing on age or anything, being at the age that you are right now, knowing that not that long ago, you know, this stuff was going on and nobody, it's not that they didn't care, nobody was alert or paid attention to all the stuff going on. That's what amazes me. Now, stepping into another part of your story, you are an accomplished author and you covered a book, a part of your life, the music part of your life. You were entranced in Gladys Knight and the Pips. You wrote a
Yes.
book, Midnight Train in Georgia, and there's another.
Midnight Train from Georgia
Yeah.
because they left Georgia. Yes. It's about my brother-in-law who was a founding member, William Franklin Guest of the Pips. So this was his story. He's been in my life since I was 11 years old.
And the question I want to ask you before we get into the book, what inspired you to tell this story? Because a lot of people, if you haven't read this book, one thing I want to do for a quick shameless plug, where can they meet and greet you across the internet to get that book?
You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I would say those are the easiest. You just order it online.
Okay.
Yeah, because the book has a lot of history in it that people don't know about. And again, he was more than my brother-in-law. He was my brother. My sister and him married 3 weeks actually before my brother died,
Oh,
who was the oldest. I'm the youngest. And he from, so you got a brother, you got another son. But again, my sister was 15 when they met. So he was in my life since I was 11. I mean, Gladys was in crinoline slips and ballerinas slippers, that's how far we go back. Our families became one family.
okay. And in writing this book, you received multiple awards for it, and a lot of different type of recognition for it. The Book Fest International, um,
Yes.
went on, and you've had a lot of other creative projects since then. Here's what I want to key in on as a historian, because you're a historian in this book, and that's a title that is amazing to have because we can be educators, we can be teachers, but actually being a historian, you have a piece of history, R&B music, but music that has transcended because you've seen it literally go from the 70s to now. And
No,
you
I've seen it go from the 50s.
go from the 50s on.
I grew up in a music household. My father was the lead singer of the Morning Doves Gospel Quartet,
Okay.
and my mother loved jazz. So, and we had those 45. So I grew up in music. My sister and brother, they were 4 and 5 years older than me. So I sort of followed everything they did. My brother also could sing. He thought he could do Jackie Wilson as well as Jackie Wilson. He
Uh-huh.
used to sing like a little Ernest Baxter, and my sister and I were dancers and stuff during that time. We even studied at Minnesota Community Center. That's where Debbie Allen studied, because that's when we were growing up. We learned the arts at community centers and the projects in various areas. That's where we went and dance or music and I also had two bands, so we can talk about that too.
So you really have music's in your blood, in your veins. Now,
Right.
now, at the end of the day, after writing this book and getting everything to where it is today, we're sitting at 2025. We're about to enter 2026, and our world, as you know it, and as I don't know it, you're seeing some things that probably are looking like the past, aren't you?
Oh yes, absolutely for sure. But even if you read the book well, let me just say this, because what people don't know is that the original Pips, the first Pips, were Gladys, her brother Merrill Bubba Knight, her sister Brenda Knight, my brother-in-law, William Guest, and his sister, Eleanor Guest. Those were the original Pips that my brother contended till the end of his life that that was the best group. Okay,
Well,
so they left, cousin Edward came in later on. That's because Eleanor, my brother-in-law's sister, and Gladys' sister Brenda, they wanted to get married and have children. So there's, the story of the book of how the music was discovered and how at Bubba's 10th birthday party, 10-year-old birthday party, the group came together because Garfield, one of their friends, they had these little portable record players that nobody would know anything about now. He had to go home and take his record player. So they didn't have any music. So they started singing. And then the parents says, wow, these kids sound good together. And because their parents sang in the choir at church, in the adult choir, and the kids sang in the children's choir. So then they decided to form this group. How they became the Pips is because cousin Pip used to take them around as their road manager. And when they needed a name, they said, well, we're going to name, the group after Pip. And how they became Gladys Knight and the Pips is because somebody ripped them off in Atlanta by putting out a record, having them think that they were just coming over to make a recording, and they put the record out, Every Beat of My Heart. And someone from New York called during that time, because there's a lot more history in this, as you will hear in a second. They ended up having to leave Bobby Robinson because Bobby Robinson also ripped them off.
oh
You know,
man.
that was during the days of the rip off of the artists. It was like that, what they used to call the Chitlin circuit that you played, and through the South and the various things they couldn't. The restrooms. They tell a story about once they got stopped by the police, and the police made them just sing in order to just even be able to get to their gig. So um, after a while, they knew that they had to leave Bobby Robinson. Gladys actually went home to have her first child. She was married to Jimmy Newman, who was one of the saxophone players of the group. So she went back home. Well, my the Pips, my brother-in-law and Edward and Bubba, they stayed in New York, and they met Marguerite Mays. Marguerite Mays was the former wife of Willie Mays, the baseball player,
Oh,
and she'd also been married to one of the Ink Spots, but she was, back in that, also involved in the boxing world and stuff. Well, she loved their music and wanted them to get back together for a group. So she had my brother-in-law and Bubba and Edward come over, and she talked to them and says, yeah, you all are doing fine, but you all would do much better if you got Gladys back. So they called Gladys, and she came back to New York. So that's the chapter that I actually call polishing up their act, because what Marguerite Mays did was take them, she moved them out of Harlem, moved them to the island, put them in nice cars, say, okay, if you go to Harlem, you got to go like you got some money in your pocket. Here, you drive this car, you drive that car, and don't get in any trouble. And I always call them an apple pie group. So when she said, okay, well, we need to, polish up your act a little bit, get you some showmanship on stage. Well, she took them to Charlie Atkins. Charlie Atkins was the part of the duo Holes, Atkins and Coles, Honey Cole, who actually ran the Apollo. They were tap dancers. So she took them to Charlie Atkins, and he took them under his act. He got started with a little pen and a can, just heat and beats on a can. And that's how they started learning those steps that they're known for, the pip steps. He started them out in just rhythm and taught them that choreography. And Marguerite Mays took them as far as they could go. And they were just on another level at that point when Berry Gordy discovered them. Okay. Gladys didn't necessarily want to go to Motown because she thought she would have to compete with Diana Ross, the Marvelettes, Martha and the Vandellas and all that. She didn't want to go, but they had a certain pact that whoever got, they were four of them. So you had to be outvoted in order to win. So the three guys outvoted her. So they went to
Motown.
Motown. Yeah. And that took them on, again, another level. That started opening up the global stage, where they started traveling around, the country, then doing some stuff globally. The international stuff started after they left, Motown. And again, there was still some ripping off going on. They ended up with Buddha Records. And it's so funny, in that same box of stuff that I was finding, I found some letters with me writing Art Cass, the president of Buddha at that time, because we were also doing disco bells. We're in like the mid 70s.
Yeah.
So, we talked about the 50s with the Frankie Lymans and Jackie Wilson and BB Kings, in the 60s, which Motown is really known for, like 60s and 70s. By the 70s, it's Buddha Records. That's when the Grammys and the American Music Awards and all of that started to happen. They started having hit after hit after hit. That's when Midnight Train to Georgia was recorded there under, the Buddha days. So that took them to a whole other level. But Buddha gave them what they wanted, that they only concentrated on them. They didn't have to compete with all of the other Motown acts. And that's when they really just spiraled up. They were traveling all over the world. They were doing, movies, Claudine, Diane Carroll. A lot of people don't know those names. It's amazing to me when I was teaching how much I had to teach the young people about our icons. Because they didn't know Diane Carroll, for example. She was a professional nurse on television in the 50s. I mean, that was just unheard of back then, talking about breaking barriers, so all of that. And, all of these little things that intersected and crossed. I mean, they even sang, at the White House, all of these things in history back going on, those things were somewhat new, to certain groups and stuff like that. They did not have all of those experiences to walk into those certain rooms, to go into those venues and perform. I saw something from the Waldorf when I tell people, I was a kid riding around in these limousines and hanging out at the Waldorf, hotel, thanks to my brother-in-law. So, it was so funny. That's where I thought my life was going. And, God had another path for me, but did not just open up that path and showed me where I can take those same elements. If we get back to what we were talking about before, writing, music, and production, and create other kinds of products. As I was going through all those boxes and looking at, I had forgotten some things, that I'd done and I'd created. Everybody keeps asking me, when are you going to write your memoir? And I said, well, I'm still living it because I'm hoping that God's not through with me yet. And I still got some footsteps footprints to leave in the sand along the way because I just still feel like I have a lot of juice and a lot in me. I'm just sitting down, sort of watching, trying to make sense of all of the things that are going on. But truly, I have been blessed. But getting back to the book, my brother-in-law, and he was very, very spiritual. Well, they were spiritual as a group. He wanted their lives to mean something, to matter. He wanted young people not to make the same mistakes that they made. He wanted to impact others by talking about the decisions that he made, good and bad. The outside children that he had that were, not my nieces and nephews from my sister, but just the mistakes and the different things that this business can suck you into. And because it's a plethora of things out there for you to get into,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
good and bad.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
The good, bad, and the ugly.
and the ugly. So he is very, very honest, even with all of this stuff. And what I love, this book is about, faith, family, love, hope, and harmony, which I always say is more than the blending of voices, the blending of spirit. And how you can, evolve as a family. I mean, they were together, like almost 39 years. That's, again, unheard of for a particular group. And they went through a whole lot together. And there are so many lessons learned, but there's so much light in this. I mean, the humor and the laughs. And while it's historic in time and some of the things that they had to go through, I mean, there was no, wasn't the bitterness and the angry and the because that's the way it was,
Right.
back then.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that was just the way it was. So everything was evolving and growing and moving up. And that history is important in the history of just music because he was still writing music and producing. He was producing the Stubb Girls. The Stubb Girls were the nieces of Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops.
Okay.
His Deborah is, the my sister's pastor secretary. So I was just in Detroit back in July, and I was hanging out with my niece and nephew, and we were going to a few clubs and stuff. And there we ran into, some of the Motown kids of these, or grandkids while we were there. Uh, one of the Marvelettes, daughter Keisha, and we call her Kat, but Catherine Schaefer, who wrote the forward of the book. Kat died about 4 or 5 months before the book came out, but her daughter still gives the family and friends picnic. So we were able to go to that, and I'm saying, to see them when they were little babies and now they are mothers and fathers, and that was just so delightful because one of the things that Motown did, I think that was so great, they would have the whole Motown family. They would have them go to picnics, which is one of the things that they love. They would have these big picnics that they would go and bring their families together and they would have fun and do stuff like that. And that was one of the things that, I loved about the industry, the backstage, the fun, the hotels, all of the laughter and all of the many groups. My sister and I, when we were young, we won the dance contest, the twist contest at the Apollo. I won for the little girls and she won for the teenagers. But we had some of the I mean, Gladys Knight and the Pips were in the back. We had some of the old groups, and we had our friends in the audience all cheering for us, and those memories again. Um, I thought that I would be on stage dancing in the theater, but I remember one New Year's Eve and I got in a car accident. And for some reason, I said I would not dance for money anymore, and again, but life, my path was set for me. I didn't even know it was. And it was set for me, but I did not, again, those gifts that I was given, they just moved. I wrote theses and dissertations, but anything that I produced on television, on radio, had music. It had, a rug to it. Still like that. And during the pandemic, I wrote 3 songs. So I'm still writing music, and it was good to find some of my sheet music out there that was copywritten, because I still, love music. In fact, Deborah Stubbs, she actually had sent those 3 songs out to a Grammy artist during the pandemic who loved them. I thought he was going to get back to me, and that never happened. I still have hope that something's going to happen with the music. And now that I've found all of these other writings, I'm going to start because, I was looking at that stuff and I was saying, wow. And a lot of it was spiritual, but it was just so much clarity. I mean, it makes so much sense to me today. And I wrote this stuff maybe 50 years ago,
Whoa.
and it's, wow, I was thinking this, or this was coming out of me then, and some of it is still just written, and I still write like that. I'll write on anything. If I have an idea, I mean, I don't care. Envelopes, they used to tease me and said that I was going to be at a conference and I would be pulling out all these little pieces of paper because sometimes I'll write the ending first before I get to the beginning or the middle. So, it's just been wonderful. And again, I lived this story. I was a part of this story since I was 11 years old. So even though I interviewed my brother-in-law for maybe about the last 7 or 8 years of his life, and then transcribed the tapes from that and put the books. But I'd heard these stories over and over again. In fact, I had to decide which is the best of the version that I'm going to use. I mean, he was such a charismatic and, colorful, funny person that, I wanted to shine the best light on it and, just show people that you can have that kind of harmony and spirit. You can go through life and make some mistakes, and you can still come out full of light. And at the end of the last few chapters of this book is really talking about, although he's been spiritual all of his life, but when he had his heart attack and he thought he was going to die, and how the Lord came to him and said, you still have more to do, and various things, and how he got really, really focused and centered on trying to make his life have meaning. So his life had a lot of meaning to me because he was my brother, much more than an in-law, always my brother since 11 years old. He and Edward, they would have me hand by hand. They would take me everywhere they went, He called me Little Di, which people will find out in the book. So that was just an amazing time of my life. Well, it was part of my life. I mean, he died 10 years ago. Christmas Eve, we'll be, celebrating that life because it was a wonderful life. And, to this, even though I've written other stuff, but this was, something that I could write, which was a labor of love, that I wanted to put that legacy in. And hopefully maybe somebody will write mine one day. Now that I know I have a few fans out there.
And one thing I want to say to you in closing before we get out of here is one thing. I do a little testimony. I met with your contact person. I did my research on you and everything else like that. I want to tell you thank you on the air real quick, and everybody that's listening. The great thing that you can do inside a podcast is look at the show notes. The show notes will have ways that you can meet and greet Lady Ziegler across the internet. You can get entranced and immersed in everything that she has to offer. And another thing, and this is the most important thing. This is a testimony I'm going to give to you real quick. You will learn about the history of a Black woman. And when I say this, you will learn what in her lifetime beyond the book, what it took to persevere, what it took to stand ground when others wouldn't stand the ground. And that part of your history, along with this book, because I love the book, but just the history of you is what, like, it brought me to a tear because you're living history and you should be way more celebrated than you are. I'm telling you that ahead of time. Because here are the things that we don't do. We don't give our flowers to the people that curate life for us later. You didn't curate it in the beginning because you had to build it for us. But now you've made a curation where people can go do things. People of color, women have a way in media. They can go through channels and do things that we'll say, I'm born 1985, so that's 40 years. We can actually go back further than that. Let's say 50 years ago, which is crazy to think. The things that you started doing then, we couldn't do 50 years ago. And 50 years later, people are able to walk in the door and sit at any table they want to because of a person like you. And don't mean to point at you, I know that's rude. But the thing is being able to do what I do right now, to sit here, to freely do this show, to have listeners, to have people hear about this. It's technically talk radio without the video. But the thing is, if you didn't pave the way for this, I wouldn't be doing this right now. If you didn't decide one day that, hey, I see something wrong, there wouldn't be a right today. And then I wouldn't have the right today to do what I do and what everybody else does in any form of content creation, anything with art, even if they scribble down a little drawing or something like that and want to express themselves in any form of creativity, you have provided that. So I know tonight we're both Eastern Standard Time. When we get done with this interview, you're going to go on and go to sleep, whatever. But take a look at the mirror and really think and know this, that you've made a difference in the world. You didn't care about the materialistic part of it or the monetary part because all that stuff has come hand in hand in what everything you've done. You didn't care about the recognition or the superlatives that come along with that. And for people that don't know what superlatives are, those are the rewards. You did it because you saw something wrong.
Yes.
And that is what plays to my heartstrings and plays to so many other people's heartstrings because we grew up in an area in an section in life where there may have been some forms of racism, there may have been some forms of hardships that I went through, but I will never ever have to go through anything that you went through. I will only know from you telling me because it's not written in a history book. And getting this type of history out in the world, this is what I love. Knowing that you have been preserved by the Lord to give your testimony and give your story. This is what I live for. This is why I do a podcast. This is what makes me love being able to allow someone to come on my platform or the platform and give their story and give who they are. So, Lady Dhyana Ziegler, I want to tell you this. Myself, the world, and everywhere, from New York City all the way to wherever, from Harlem to Knoxville to wherever, the world loves you.
Thank you. You've been a blessing.
Thank you. And in closing, I need you to do something for me. And this is the profound thing that I love for the guests on the show to do, is you have a prominent power. I need you to leave us with the mission statement. And your mission statement in life is something that's going to move people. Because when me and you are gone, since everything's video and digital now, they're going to see this video someday. And someone's going to be like, hey, this lady helped me move my life into a better place. She helped me shift myself into a position I would have never thought of. So please leave us with the greatest mission statement ever.
Well, I would say first of all, you have to believe, know who you are, know whose you are. And I always say, what we have to do is bigger than us. So think big things, but more importantly, do great things. The legacy lives on. It is more important to me that the shoulders are strong enough to carry the future. And those of us who are still here must be those strong shoulders. And look to the light. Look to the light because that's the future. And knowing that this isn't it. If I had started to think about what could happen to me if I did this, that, or the other, just like our ancestors, I would not be here. Again, if you see something that needs to be done and you're able to do it, do it. I didn't even know why, I always say I am just an instrument, but I didn't even know that I was being played, but the melody was rich and strong. And I could say that now, rich and strong, because again, meeting you has given me a message today that my life has meaning. And that's what my brother-in-law wanted in this book. And that's the only thing that I want, to make an impact, so that we could, and sometimes to do that, you got to stir things up.
Yes.
I still don't mind stirring things up. I kept, as this stuff is going on, and yeah, it's like it's come full circle. I've seen this. Why is this the only thing that we have? We're equipped now, so I hope people will believe that they are equipped, because those who came before me, those who come after me, that it's all about the path, and we have to keep carving that path. We have to keep seeing a better future, because this can't be it.
Right.
So I am one, and I've always said I cannot live without hope. I mean, Jesse J, keep hope alive. Well, that hope is alive in me and burning like a flame, and that flame brings the light. So just know and believe that there used to be, whatever you can think and believe, you can achieve. Well, you have to be able of, because if I stop and thought about all of the things that I sort of found myself involved in, or having to fight or to plow through, um, I don't know. If I thought about it, I could have just chickened out. I didn't. It's just a drive. I'm like that now. If it's wrong, I told you about those other three people who were fired. They were treated like criminals, treated like dogs. If it's wrong, it's wrong, and you got to call it out.
Right. You do.
And I think that today's testament is that I will keep calling it out. That I will keep trying to, what I should say, raise young minds. And we have to be not only an example, we have to be the sample.
That is so true.
That's a research term, but you got to be the sample. You got to go out there and do. I don't, I don't have that fear. And then you have to show up and you have to do it well. I couldn't have done half of the things I did if I were not a scholar. If I didn't do, I would have been crucified. So I had to go out there. Only reason I could do that is I had to be better than my colleagues. I wasn't trying, but I had to be better than them, because my white colleagues, they weren't going to have the same reaction. Okay. But all the hell that I was raising, I wouldn't have got tenured. I wouldn't have got promoted. I would have gotten thrown out, but I was good, and to the point where even the white folks loved me. So in Tennessee,
Yeah.
and yeah, and in Tennessee, as I said, the chancellor says he was glad that someone has finally came there and said that this is wrong.
Challenging the status
So
quo.
yeah, it is. You don't always go out for leadership, but I think that Lerone Bennett, who used to be one of the editors at Ebony magazine, he used to say, we don't need leadership, we need fellowship. And I still believe that we need fellowship. We need for us to be able to follow, fellowship, meaning we're all on this together, moving in that direction. And
Yes.
that's important. Even though somebody has to steer, but somebody has to have the rear too.
Yes, they do.
That's all part of the same fellowship.
Yes, ma'am. So on that note, I am JR, and this is Lady Dhyana Ziegler, and we are signing off.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at oncommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening, and tune into the next episode.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You
Um,
got a little thing to do.
yeah, I'll send it over to my virtual assistant. It'll take them about, I don't know, give or take with the election and everything, because we got some crazy stuff going on between here and there in
Yeah.
Virginia. We got a real rough election going on up there right now. Um,
I know. I'm rooting for you.
yeah, what we'll do is I will have a copy. Let's say it's Tuesday now. Next Wednesday, I will have an
Mhm.
edited copy of this to send to you so you can review it and let me know if we can release it. And then we'll get a release date. Does that work for
Yeah,
you?
I tell you, believe it or not, I hate to listen to my own stuff, but I'll I will do it. I'm
Well,
I'm really shy as much as I talk, but I'm really shy about my own stuff. I don't know if you can, because I'm such I learned how to be the broadcaster and stuff like that.
yeah.
But yeah.
But other than that, I'm going to go ahead and let you go because it's time for me to go get some dinner. Hopefully, I can find something good to eat out here somewhere. And look,
Right.
you stay blessed, please. Please stay blessed and immersed in the Lord. You are
Yes.
amazing.
Thank you. And I look forward to hearing from you about next year or whatever.
Yes, ma'am. I will, and I'm gonna put your name in some other places too that are at least Mid Atlantic area because I don't want you to travel too far. But Maryland and a few places up that way. And I'll let you know some more. Thank you very much, and you have a great
Okay,
evening.
it's such a pleasure and thank you so much. You've touched my spirit.
All right, thank you. Bye.